Welcome to Chaplain Otto Ministries. I'm Otto, and today I will be your host in episode number 6 of this new series, Behind the Wire: Anger Management with Incarcerated Veterans. This is also my first time teaching on video, so yes, if you're currently driving and listening on Spotify, you can now watch this on Spotify and also on YouTube. If this is your first time joining me here today, welcome to Chaplain Otto Ministries. Anger Management is a series that I have been teaching in Pickaway Correctional to our veterans who are incarcerated behind bars, and I started teaching this class online to allow family members of incarcerated veterans to join in and just give them a way to connect through this podcast. And with that as well, I'm putting this out there just to help anybody who might need the help, because at one point in my life, I struggled, and I personally know that there's a better way. It just takes patience and practice. So you may not be behind bars. However, you might be a prisoner of the war in your own mind, and that might have you missing in action from those that you love, or maybe experiencing some really cool activities. So my question is, are you struggling with PTSD, anger, substance abuse, or maybe even suicidal thoughts? At one time, I personally have struggled with each of those, and that's why I'd like to invite you to join me in this series to help identify your triggers, and together we can create a process to help you move, shoot, and communicate using your own remedial action that we can develop in this series together to help you overcome the weapon jams of life. Today, we're going to tighten up our shot group as we learn how to manage conflict. Whew! Conflict. What is conflict? It is defined as a serious disagreement or argument. I have found myself in many disagreements and arguments, and sometimes I've started those by going into a conversation that I didn't know how to handle correctly. So today our goal is to identify and apply conflict resolution skills to disputes and disagreements. So what is the importance of this training? Like, why would we train for this? Well, conflict is guaranteed to happen in life. And if you're a combat veteran, I'm not talking about like conflict in like battle, like the stresses of a firefight. I'm talking about like simple things, simple conflicts that we need to learn how to extinguish and prevent the fight versus inflaming it. Like, I'm not in Afghanistan anymore. However, for a long time, my reaction to conflict could put me in a combat mode, like the little things. But the good news is I'm getting better, and so can you. So today, like, what are potential threats of conflicts that we might encounter? Like, not life or death, like combat stuff, but like everyday conflicts. Well, that's easy. I feel like it's a conflict dealing with civilians. I'm just kidding. Most of the conflict that, you're going to face is going to be at work, at home, with family or friends. Conflict can also be, just kind of created out of nowhere while doing like simple everyday tasks like driving to work, going down the highway, or maybe even, shopping at the grocery store. The conflicts can and will happen. So today we're going to learn how to manage conflicts that, life is going to bring us. We'll learn when and when not to face conflict. I also do have a personal story that I'm going to share at the end of this episode about a conflict that I faced, a few years ago while I was in the car business and trying to get, a deal signed off on for the last day of the month. So deal or no deal. It was cool to look back at that scenario using this material for how I handled that. So let's see what happened. So here we are talking about conflict. So what are some big triggers for conflict? Well, for me, big triggers that can lead to conflict are miscommunication. Like, that is the big one. Maybe it's just me, but miscommunication can really grind my gears. Like, what about you? Sometimes I miscommunicate, and I'm working on being clearer with what I say because I found that, I need to be better at how I communicate because this miscommunication of mine can create unnecessary conflicts in my life. Miscommunications are more common than you might realize. And today, hopefully, this will help you learn to listen and clarify, allowing you to be able to, communicate effectively, achieving a new skill, and becoming a problem solver. Why? Because miscommunication can lead to aggravation. And being aggravated, well, that equals conflict. How can aggravation create conflict? Well, think about this. You're driving on your way to work and you get cut off on the road, or someone, doesn't use a turn signal and you kind of start slowing down out of nowhere. Or, you know, this is a conflict. Honestly, I think this next one should be against the law, but someone who is using self scan at the grocery store who has 56 items. Oh my goodness. That is a conflict. Maybe something happened a while back and someone's not speaking to you because they're mad. Well, that's a conflict. Conflict can result in either problem solving and peace or all out war. And, I know that war part. That's easy. But I don't win the war by creating unnecessary conflict in the battle that results in, casualties that could have been avoided. I lose those battles, and so do you. I want to win the battles by problem solving so that I don't lose the war and forfeit the chance of peace and resolution. I want to be a problem solver, not a mischief maker. So, how we approach conflict will greatly affect the outcome. I'm going to say that again. How we approach conflict will greatly affect the outcome. I need to have the right mindset. Going into the conversation, I also need to understand that having the right mindset does not guarantee a resolution or peace. That takes two. Personally, I have to try and resolve the situation. Whether, I feel like I'm at fault or I feel like, I was wronged. I don't like that feeling, that disconnect. So I'm going to, do everything that I can to try and find a peaceful resolution, because if I don't try, like, nothing is going to change. And I'm not okay with that. And you shouldn't be okay with that either. If I go into a conflict with the wrong mindset, man, I've done this so many times. Going into it with the wrong mindset, then I am pulling the grenade and throwing the pen. I mean, I'm going to give up all control. It's like I'll transform into an elevator and go wherever my buttons are pushed. Going into conflict with the wrong mindset for me, man, that will wind me up tighter than a championship yo-yo. I will surrender all self control and become a puppet in someone else's play. And I'm sick and tired of that. I don't want to lose personally or create separation, in friendships or family. So I need to go in with the right mindset. I need to keep a hold of that one thing that matters most. The one thing that matters when I'm facing conflict, when I'm angry, when life's not going well, there's one thing I have to focus on, and that's my self-control. I can forfeit it or I can own it. To accomplish this, objective, having self-control is a must. And also, you have to have discernment, which is the ability to judge well. And I know judgment sounds like a dirty word, doesn't it? Like, I thought this was supposed to be peaceful. That sounds conflicting, but I'm not talking about like judging someone. I'm talking about judging the conflict in the situation and having the discernment to ask yourself, like, is this argument worth it? Like, is this argument worth it? Because one thing that I've realized is I don't have to attend every argument that I'm invited to, and either do you. You do not have to attend every single argument or conflict, that you are invited to. The easy part is attending the conflict. The hard part is deciding when to. And that's wisdom. I mean, some people could argue all day about this, that, and the third. I mean, about any and everything under the sun. The people that have to like challenge everything or be right. For a while, that was me. I'm curious, is it you? I felt the need, to attend the party, even ones that I wasn't invited to. I mean, for an example, like look at social media. I'm sure you can think of a million bad examples of how people have faced or started or put themselves into a situation of conflict that they had no business being a part of. You know, I know that in my past, I have not faced conflict well, and I'm getting better with practice. But some new situations, can come and throw me off guard at times. Those surprise attacks. The good news is, because I've practiced and I keep trying and I keep learning and wanting to grow, that when I do mess up, because I'm human, when I do fall, I get right back up again and I gain my self control faster each time. So, what does that mean? Like I said, I'm human. I make mistakes. However, I don't stay stuck in those moments. And I'm practicing, on not dwelling on the moments and, trying not to expand the problem in my head. Like sometimes I can make the problem in my head bigger than the problem is in real life. And it can be a real mental fight to not give over my self control and to practice my coping skills when conflict arises, anger, and all of that. If I can do it, so can you. So, what are these skills that I'm using when experiencing conflict, like, or, starting to get angry? The first thing I recognize is my breathing, because I know if my breathing gets out of control, then the rest of my vitals and everything are just going to go absolutely insane. And, I'm not saying like I got to sit down Indian style or something like that and, start breathing. I just take in a good deep breath and let it out. And, that's kind of the moment that I realize, all right, I need to take a break. So as I'm walking away from the situation, taking in a deep breath, that allows me, the time to think like, am I making this bigger in my head than it is? It gives me time to, think about like my feelings and my emotions. Are they affecting my response with my thought patterns? Realistically, am I being productive or destructive? And knowing that conflict is going to happen in life and understanding that I have the choice of not attending every argument that I'm invited to. I need to understand what the benefit of facing conflict can be so that I can have the discernment to know when I should face conflict. So, what are some good reasons to stand up and, face conflict in a situation? And one is, standing against what is wrong. Maybe, somebody that is drinking and driving all the time, or, using drugs. They're doing something that is very harmful to themselves, and there's no problem with saying, hey man, like, I love you, I care a lot about you, but I think that, you should not be drinking and driving, and the amount of drinking and driving that you're doing, it's not going to end out well. And I'm saying something because I care about you. And that is a good reason to face conflict. Another good reason to face conflict is, to protect someone. If somebody that is being abused or picked on, bullied, whatever, if you have the opportunity to step in and not allow that, or get the correct people involved that need to be involved with the situation. Say in a situation, something needs to change, as in, maybe somebody is consistently late on rent and you're always having to cover their half until whenever. There's no problem with saying, hey, I appreciate you living here and I like having you here. However, if you can't have rent by the time like rent is due, then this relationship here of you staying isn't going to work out. Like something needs to change. Maybe it's, how someone talks to you, and you can be like, I appreciate you, but you cannot talk to me like that because I'm not going to stand for it. And I've had to have, assertive conversations with people like that before, and, facing conflict. What is another good reason to face conflict? And this is probably like my biggest one, and that's a sense of urgency. Like a sense of urgency to do what is right, to fix something, to go after it. And I got this in 6th grade. Like this feeling of this sense of urgency to want to help and face conflict. And that's because it was September 11th, 2001, when I was in 6th grade. And, they turned on the TVs and we saw the plane go into the tower. And, as a 6th grader, I understood that our country was under attack. And I said that day, like, someday I'm going to serve my country. And, from that moment forward, I just feel like I always went after, things like that to help people. And I ended up, I did join the military and I did serve my country because I did have that sense of urgency to do what was right. And I still do today. So, other good reasons to face conflict would be, to seek and experience resolution and reconciliation. Like, you're ready to make peace. Another good reason to face conflict would be to right a wrong, to go confess your wrongdoings and faults to someone. And that's not always easy. You might be going into a situation that will turn into a conflict, but you have to go in there with the right mindset, because sometimes, it doesn't always turn out bad, but the more that I think that it's going to turn out bad, the more that it does turn out bad. So the more positive I feel like I go into it, the more positive the outcome is. So let's talk about this car deal that I mentioned at the beginning of the story. And, deal or no deal. What was the conflict? What was the issue? This was the weekend before the last day of the month. One of my sales guys, had a customer build their deal online, send in a credit app, and, called in to put a $500 deposit on this car, without coming in to drive it or anything. Our objective is to always get the customer in the store. However, that's not always possible at times. Conflict. The, deal was approved. This was the only model that I had like that. And it was a Saturday. So this is, a big sales day for us. Every week, Saturday's the big day. It's the playoffs. And I usually, wouldn't hold a car on a Saturday. Too many people call in and, then they back out because they go somewhere else. And you're just kind of like chasing your tail with it. This customer had signed a worksheet, digitally, that, was agreeing to purchase the car. If you're not in the car business, a worksheet is not a legal binding contract. That happens when you go to finance, and they hadn't come in, so we hadn't even got close to going that far yet. But I had found out that the customer had moved from several states away for a promotion, just bought a fixer-upper, and was currently staying in the motorhome that they drove from a few states away, during the renovation. And she also worked 3rd shift. So understanding all of these elements, I decided to go ahead and hold the car for, delivery within at least the next 3 days for the end of the month, because I needed to count that deal for the end of the month. Well, the last day of the month comes around, and, I ask my salesman, what's going on with this deal? And can she come in, or are we going to deliver this car to her? The deal was pending, and it's the end of the month. At the beginning of the month, the incentives always change. We had a really good rate, and that was also subject to change. And I needed that document signed, that legal document signed, for a win-win. He said he tried calling, and I asked him, I'm like, can you try again? Like, send a text, send an email. Hours later, I asked him, hey, any response? And he's like, no, just refund her money. And I'm like, no, I held this car on a Saturday. Let's not do that and figure out what happened. I mean, you told me she was so happy on Saturday when you talked to her on the phone. She just moved here, and was like, boom. It hit me. She's most likely asleep because she works 3rd shift. I'm like, I got a plan. I'll be back. So I went to finance and I asked them to print out the paperwork and like label everything to make it super simple to sign and explain for the salesperson so that he could, have that documentation to take for a home delivery. I had the vehicle cleaned up and gassed. And, once I got all of this stuff ready, I explained to the salesman, she's most likely asleep because she works third shift. I had re-listened to the call from Saturday by then and found out that the customer had the same issue trying to buy a car at another location the previous month before she moved. And because of her schedule, the vehicle got sold because she wasn't able to make it. And now she was actually driving her motorhome as a personal vehicle at the time to get to work. And I'm just like putting all these elements together and I'm like, this will be customer service. Drive the car over to her house, knock on the door of the camper, and when she opens it, say, congratulations. This was around the time that right after COVID when home deliveries were becoming more popular in the car business. And based on all of the evidence, I thought that this would be a great idea. My salesman didn't. Conflict. He just insisted on refunding the money and it would be her fault for not answering. Conflict. I mean, what? That is not how I operate. If she didn't want the vehicle, that's totally fine. We would refund the money. However, I wasn't going to guess and just forfeit this deal. So I asked my co-manager to cover down for me and I took the paperwork and I drove the car to Parsons Avenue in Columbus, Ohio, which is the hood. And guess what? She was asleep. And she was thrilled that we went above and beyond to come over with that car because that night she was able to drive it to work instead of her motorhome. Problem solved. She gave one of the best online reviews for the service that we provided that maybe that I've ever gotten. And I was willing to go face the conflict for a win-win. And what did I have when facing this conflict? What do you need to have when you go in facing a conflict? Compassion. You need to be able to enter the heart and mind of another. Compassion at times honestly can feel like a wound because life teaches us that if we love, we suffer. Compassion is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, showing mercy and understanding. I had to have compassion and understanding for this customer's situation. Putting myself in their shoes, I was able to problem solve. You know, I was able to solve her problem of driving a motorhome and my problem of not having the documentation. By entering the heart and mind of the customer, I was able to find a resolution, a sale for the dealership, and transportation for a newfound friend. So let's look at a biblical reference of, how we should act. And we're going to find this in Colossians 3:12 through 14. Put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anybody has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so must you also do. But above all of these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. Now, you can put on all of these things: kindness, humility, meekness, long suffering, which is patience. But if you don't take off a few things, you will not have forgiveness. And if you don't have forgiveness, well, there is no way in heaven you will be able to put on love, which is the bond of perfection. At one time in my life, I was a very angry, hateful, mean, arrogant person. The opposite of what some of you see today or right now. Finding God has changed my life so much, and implementing the training that I've got from this anger management is adding to my arsenal. It's like a steroid to what I've been learning biblically. And I'm getting better, and so can you. I had to take off some things of my old self to obtain the main thing, and that's love. So let's look at Colossians a little bit before and a little bit after those verses to see what things, do you need to take off to receive the full blessing of what might be hindering you. Colossians 3 5 through 15. Therefore, put to death your members which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanliness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is adultery. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. But now you yourselves are to put off all of these. Pay attention: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, all the filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge, according to the image of him who created him. Where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, slave nor free, but Christ is in all and in all. So what does that mean? We are all equal in God's eyes. Put off your anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language, and put on the character of the new man. We are picking up in verse 12, which says, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on the tender mercies of kindness, humility, meekness, long-suffering, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so must you do also. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection, and let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. Amen. Like we talked about, life isn't always easy. The same pressure that presses the diamond can be the same pressure that cracks the nut. You choose, just like you choose how you get angry, how you act, and what arguments are worth attending. One way to prevent a problem from expanding is to take a break from the situation, to think. You don't have to feel pressured to resolve it right away, like immediately. Allow yourself, some time to collect your thoughts and consider the issue at hand and your responses. Now, taking a break doesn't mean like blowing out of there all emotional, like a bull in a china shop, causing a little bit more chaos right before you pretend to take the higher road. That's not what that is. Just be real. Like, hey man, like it's going to be best if I take a moment to chill out. Like I want to figure this out right now. I just need a moment to gather myself. That way I don't do anything to make the situation worse. Can I get 15 minutes and then we can figure this out together? See, you need to clarify the communication you're hearing also, to eliminate any miscommunication. So what I hear you saying is you need a break. You need 15 minutes. You want to come, back to this and resolve this together. In other words, you just need a moment and then most likely everything will be okay. Like you need to be clear. So many times we think that we hear what someone said, but many times we hear our own interpretation of it and we're not on the same page. And that can result in, more unnecessary conflict. We need to communicate our needs and viewpoints firm, yet gracious. Conflict is a normal process where both parties, when willing, can work through it. When applying conflict management skills and compassion to disputes, relationships can improve and successful resolution is possible. I have plenty of stories of wrong things becoming right. So as we wrap this up, I want to make sure that I point out the main point of that verse that we talked about just briefly ago in Colossians. I would be robbing you if I didn't. Now, many people use this verse at weddings, or they hear it at weddings, and this actually has nothing to do with marriage, but it also has everything to do with marriage and realistically life. The point is, if you can love, then you can live. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Amen. Well, this was fun. And if you like today's episode, hit the subscribe button on Spotify or YouTube, wherever you are listening or watching from. If you think this might help anybody, send it to them. I know that this is going to get a little bit better the more that I practice, just like practicing my anger management. I'm just thinking it was like just a few months ago, the very the very end of October that, the very end of November that I taught my first class in prison. And then I learned how to teach my first class on a podcast. And now I have a video that is going to stream on multiple platforms. God is good. I want to thank you so much for the support. And if you like this content and believe in the mission, I want to lay this on your heart to partner with Chaplain Otto Ministries. We're getting ready to take on our 4th prison. This is 100% volunteering, and all of our funds raised help us to share the gospel on the streets and in prison. Chaplain Otto Ministries is a registered nonprofit 501c3, and you can support by writing a check or do it online. Super easy. PayPal or Zelle by searching Chaplain Otto Ministries. You can search it by my email, which is chaplainotto@gmail.com or chaplainottoministries.com. And Otto is OTTO. I am going to put a link for all of those to include my email in the description. Thank you for joining my first video, but these 6, teaching, going through this anger management. Until next time, stay blessed.